Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 87, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire. We're just after the release of Superman. We just talked about it. This is the post-Superman episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, but also the pre-Fantastic Four First Steps episode. One big DCU film to the next, and we head right into the next big MCU film. It's such an exciting time. Honestly, I'm so happy. And I hope Fantastic Four is great because I liked Superman, and so to get two really solid DCU and MCU films in the span of 2 weeks, basically, that's amazing. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. We also have Comic-Con to look forward to in the next couple weeks, so that's also very exciting. But guys, thank you so much. If you are watching or listening on YouTube, thank you for joining us here. Make sure to subscribe. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers by New Year's Day 2026. So that's a little goal of mine, and I'm just super grateful for all of you guys who are joining us and listening to the full podcast. Make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and if you are interested in listening to the audio-only platforms, that is where the full podcast is loaded first. So if you are interested in that, the video version of the full podcast is up on usually Monday or Tuesday. But if you want to hear the entire podcast in its entirety, but the full podcast in its entirety, before anyone else, it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast Saturday mornings in the United States. You can go check it out there and leave a rating as well for that. That will do it for the intro, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys, Pixar has been equated with quality for the longest time, and it still is. I thought Inside Out 2 was phenomenal. I thought it was great. I thought Elemental was really good. And while Elio I didn't think was top tier Pixar, I enjoyed it, and I thought it took some swings, and I enjoyed it for what it was, even though I thought it was a little disappointing just for the Pixar canon and Pixar standard. But still, Pixar is still taking big swings. Case in point, the next film up for Pixar is another original film called Hoppers. And when they announced this, I believe a year ago at D23, I looked at the images, I looked at the concept. It was about mind-switching beavers. And I went, this, even for Pixar, conceptually, this seems really weird. And we didn't really hear much about it afterwards, but I kept thinking to myself, okay, so you got your elementals, the concept seems pretty straightforward, romantic comedy with fire and water, you have Elio, boy goes to space, it still feels pretty straightforward. And then you have mind switching with beavers. And I just didn't know what to make of it. And so this first trailer that we're going to talk about here just completely snuck up on me because I didn't even catch it in the news cycles or anything. I just was scrolling on YouTube and caught it, and I was like, oh, okay, let's take a look. I mean, we did some trailer thoughts for Elio, so maybe if there's anything to talk about with Hoppers, then we'll do a segment. And I think there's enough to talk about because, to be quite honest with you, I watched the trailer and I still have the same basic sentiment of this is weird, this looks really weird. Even the tone of the trailer, because I get that a trailer doesn't have to be the exact same tone as the movie itself, but it still has to sort of mirror what's going on. And it's goofy, in an interesting way. And I don't know, it's almost like comedy, slapstick comedy. And I've never seen Pixar do straight up slapstick comedy. It's clever, I will give it that. I think that the stuff when this girl, is her name Mabel? Is that what her name is? She switches into the beaver and then she goes out into the wild. I think that those scenes in the wild were kind of interesting. It's a concept that we've seen before of talking to animals and being able to talk to animals and whatnot. But I thought that the bear thing was pretty funny, to be honest. Oh, well, I'm supposed to eat you, so what else am I supposed to do? And the bear's like, no, it's weird now. I think that that's actually pretty clever and pretty funny. But I couldn't bring myself to really laugh out loud at that moment, even though I do think, again, it's something that if I saw it within context in the movie, I'd probably laugh because it's funny, it's clever. Because the entire trailer is embracing the very odd and weird nature of this whole movie. And look, I mean, I've said this before many, many times, I'm not in the business anymore of doubting Pixar. They can put out the weirdest concepts, the weirdest, strangest things and make it work. So I am just not in the business of doubting Pixar anymore. That being said, as far as weird goes, this looks weird. I mean, there's no other way to put it. This looks kind of weird. So we'll see. It's coming out next March, I believe. So yeah, when next March comes around, I suppose we'll be watching Hoppers, and perhaps it'll be the best Pixar movie ever made, and we'll just have to eat our words then. I mean, I'm not hoping for it to fail or anything like that. I just have never been so baffled by a Pixar movie before. But I don't know. Then again, maybe, Turning Red seemed kind of weird, and most people loved it. I didn't particularly love it myself. I thought it was okay, but lot of people did. So that was a concept as well that seemed a little bit far-fetched, and then it turned out to be good. So we'll see. We shall see. Guys, have you seen this first trailer for the new Pixar movie, Hoppers? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, in my humble opinion, there is a movie coming out in 2025 that we need to be talking about a little bit more. Because I think that it's being underrated a little bit in terms of how big it could be, perhaps, in terms of box office, but also just how good it could be. And I'm talking about Tron Ares. Tron is a franchise that has been interesting because you would think, with a concept as interesting as Tron, where you have this grid and you have the idea of virtual reality, and now it's transitioning into AI, it looks like from this trailer, you have a concept that looked like, or at least looks like, it could spawn an entire franchise of films and TV shows and all that. But it's been weird because the original film came out, I believe, in the 80s. That was when the original film with Jeff Bridges came out. And then the sequel, Tron Legacy, came out, I think, 2008, 2009. And now the third film in the franchise is coming out in 2025. So it's been odd because it feels like a franchise that could really capitalize on the new technology as well with the visual effects and take off as a franchise. And maybe this is that point because we have a new trailer for the third film, like we talked about with Tron Ares. And I have to tell you, with every passing trailer, the more I hear about this film, this is a more story-oriented trailer. We get to see more of the cast as well. I'm getting really excited. First of all, I've been saying this before with the original teaser as well, but the visual style is so ripe to continue to evolve with the VFX shots. I'm just such a sucker for the visual language of Tron, where you have the grid and you have the light beams and all of these, just the very straight lines of light and neon colors. And it's just so cool. It's so simple, such a simple concept, but it's so captivating. It's hard to explain, but just seeing at the very end of the trailer all the different strands of light going everywhere, it just makes for a very captivating visual language. And I think that that's something where it's not talked about enough, but like I said, it's become one of the more iconic science fiction visual languages, I think, out there. So I'm very excited to see that again, if only for the fact that we get to see it in 2025. And then on top of that, the cast looks really good. I think that, I've said it before, I thought Morbius, I thought Jared Leto could have done a good job with Morbius, and Morbius was not the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, but it is Morbius. But, I think that Jared Leto has not had a great streak with these mainstream movies, Suicide Squad as Joker and then Morbius, but I think that he is still capable of being a very good actor, and this seems like a role that he fits, right? From everything I've seen in the trailer, we've all had our trepidations with Jared Leto in any of these big roles. I think that from this trailer, it's been good. I haven't really seen anything that makes me go, oh no, I'm worried about him as Joker. On top of that, it's really good to see Jeff Bridges back as Clue. I mean, long before we all knew him as Obadiah Stane in the Iron Man film, he, of course, was in films like The Big Lebowski, but he was also Clue in Tron, and I think that it's just really good to see him again, especially as he gets up there in age as well. Greta Lee and Evan Peters in the trailer as well. I just think that the way that they're presenting this, also the fact that this is, again, I mean, I know a lot of films are really trying to dig into the concept of AI at this point because it's such a prevalent topic in our society today. And I think that they should, for films like this, this feels like a very, it feels like a film that's ripe to explore that concept, unlike maybe some other things where AI, you're like, is that really a concept that we need to be inserting into this franchise? But Tron just feels like it was ahead of its time, and I think that in this world where we're kind of going from virtual reality now to just straight up AI, I think that Tron, this film has sort of an Edge of Tomorrow. This trailer has sort of an Edge of Tomorrow vibe mixed with AI and Terminator and Tron, and it just looks fun. It looks really interesting, and I'm very excited to see it. I don't know if this film's gonna make $1 billion or anything like that, but I do know that this film looks exciting, and I'm gonna be there when it comes out, and I'm pretty excited to see what happens with Tron Ares. So guys, what do you think of this second trailer for Tron Ares? It looks like it's revealing a little bit more of the story and what the vibe of this movie is going to be. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, it took until mid-July, usually a little bit longer than normal, but we have our first billion-dollar film of 2025. And to be honest with you, I don't know if any of us would have really expected this film to make $1 billion, or at least to be the first film in 2025 to make $1 billion. I think that there were probably people, and I'm not going to include myself in this, I would have never thought, A, this film would have made $1 billion, and B, it would have been the first film in 2025 to make made $1 billion. And I think that there are people in the category who might have thought this movie would have made $1 billion. But to say that it would have been the first one, I think would have been a shock to a lot of people, to be quite honest with you. I think that the number of people who thought Lilo and Stitch, the live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch, would have been the first film to make $1 billion in 2025, I think that number is very, very small. And if you're one of them, great. You have a lot more prescience than than I ever did, because I mean, you can go take a look back on all my videos that I did predicting box office for 2025. I really screwed up. And that's okay. It's just predictions. It's just for fun. But anyways, let's talk about Lilo and Stitch. So, it's interesting. And we've talked about this a lot. And I've had plenty of conversations with different people in my life about remakes and sequels and prequels. And the idea, the prevailing thought is, why are we remaking everything? It's terrible, and most of them are terrible. And, they're preventing us from making original movies. And no one should ever remake these movies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, my thought with this is that, I mean, it's complicated. It is complicated. And, in my mind, I understand movies are expensive. And so if you have to go see a movie, and if you have kids especially, you're not going to go and see Conclave. You're not going to go see Sing Sing in theaters. You're going to go see Avatar: The Way of Water, or Avatar: Fire and Ash, or Star Wars, or Thunderbolts, And I get that. But, I mean, to say that there are no original movies coming out, I think is a disservice to the fact that there are original movies coming out and people just aren't seeing them. And so it's interesting to me that's an argument. And on the other hand, I understand that, remaking every single thing, and I in general think that remaking something is not the most productive use of a studio's time, but that doesn't mean that when these remakes come out, I'm not going to go out and say that I don't like it if I do like it, because there are a number of these live-action remakes that I do enjoy. The Jungle Book, 2016's The Jungle Book, I really do enjoy it. 2019's Aladdin, I very much enjoyed it. This year, How to Train Your Dragon, I loved it. And Lilo and Stitch, I really liked it. There is a place for these movies. And if these movies are done well, I think the conversation shouldn't be, we should start remaking things. And I think the conversation should really just be, let's enjoy good movies and also support original good movies. And I think that there is a world in which these things can coexist, especially because some of these remakes, right, the way that, Lilo and Stitch can make $1 billion, do support when films like Hoppers, right, we'll talk about, or we already talked about in this podcast episode, the trailer for Hoppers. Nobody is really going to go see that movie. Elio, nobody's really going to go see that movie for Pixar. It's the Inside Out 2s of the world that support Pixar in making those movies. And so I think that it's a complicated conversation. Anyways, Lilo and Stitch is the, like I said, the first film in 2025 to make $1 billion. Let's take a quick look here at the charts, the worldwide charts. And I think that it's kind of surprising to see how relatively it's not top heavy, but just how quickly the herd thins out, I should say, after these original, these top few films. So first of all, the number one film internationally, worldwide, is a Chinese film called Ne Zha 2. And it is a film that's interesting, because I'm not going to count it in these rankings, not at all. It's just, for me, when I'm doing my rankings at the end of the year, just taking a look back at the box office, it's a film that is a very clear outlier. So again, it's not that it doesn't count or anything like that, but I mean, it is a film that is so unique because domestically, and domestically means in this case the United States, North America, it made $21 million. Internationally, and almost entirely in China, it made $1.878 billion. And so it's hard for me to look at this film because it's so different in terms of its box office makeup than the other films, but I digress. The other film, so the next film up is Lilo and Stitch, and in terms of the films I'm looking at, it's the number one, and it has $1 billion. And a Minecraft movie almost made $1 billion. It had $955 million. But then, like we've been talking about, you can see the steady drop off. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is going to top out maybe at $600 million, if that. It's at $584 million. How to Train Your Dragon, $564 million, which honestly for that film, I think it's pretty successful. I don't think any of us thought that it was going to make, I thought, we did our updated summer box office predictions, and I thought it had a chance to make a lot more than that, but I think that $564 million should be considered a success, especially given how the animated films didn't really make that much more than that. So I think that's good. Jurassic World Rebirth is at $544 million. I actually think now, which is surprising to me, I don't know if this film's going to make $1 billion. We'll see. We'll see how its legs hold up. But yeah, it's surprisingly not Not as far along towards the $1 billion track as I thought it would be. But even if it taps out at $700-800 million, that's still insanely successful. Captain America: Brave New World at $415 million, not super successful. F1, at just about $400 million. I thought that this movie had a chance for $700 million, and it's not really going to get there, but still. A lot of money for F1. Thunderbolts at $382 million. Again, not super great. Sinners at $365 million. And then Superman is still out there at $250 million. So it's really, a lot of these top-heavy movies, Lilo and Stitch, a Minecraft movie, are not films that we expected to be up there. And a lot of films like Captain America, Thunderbolts, and Jurassic World and Superman can get there. Fantastic Four I think will shoot up these rankings. I think it will nestle in there under Lilo and Stitch and between Mission Impossible. So we will see. But I just wanted to talk about the fact that Lilo and Stitch is the first film in 2025 to make $1 billion. And I think it's good for Lilo and Stitch. It is one of my favorite movies of 2025. I say that unabashedly, as also somebody who hasn't seen the original. And again, I fully admit that, but also hearing people in the comments saying, well, then your opinion doesn't count. I don't think that's true. It's just a different perspective that I'm coming at it from. And if you have seen the original film and you loved it, and I should say, I did see the original film, but it was a long time ago when I was a kid, so I don't really remember anything from it. And if you did see the original movie and you have all the love in the world for it and you hate this remake, then more power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. For a counterexample, I saw How to Train Your Dragon. It is one of the animated films that holds such a special place in my heart. I have such nostalgia for it, and I loved the remake. So it's just who we are and how it hits us, and that's just what it is. But before we round out the segment, I wanted to also quickly look at the films that are remaining for 2025 and just see, because we also, we've made different videos about predicting the remaining box office films for 2025. But I just want to take a look at the films that, are coming out still and which films I still think are going to make $1 billion and which ones I might adjust my expectations a little bit. So Fantastic Four, I don't think it's going to hit $1 billion. Again, I think it can cap out very nicely at $700-ish million. And I think that's going to be a really good thing. Tron Ares, we talked about the trailer for Tron Ares. I don't think so. I think it can make $500 million. That's pretty huge for Tron Ares, to be quite honest with you. Wicked for Good, though, I still think is going to hit $1 billion very comfortably. I think it will. Zootopia 2, I mean, you would think just based on precedent that it will, but I don't know. We'll see. I think it will, but I'm not 100% sold on that. And then you have basically the only other one is Avatar: Fire and Ash, and I think that one is pretty much a lock. So I think that you have Wicked for Good and Avatar: Fire and Ash that I think are still very much locks, and Zootopia 2, I am on the fence. Guys, what do you think about Lilo and Stitch being the first $1 billion film of 2025? I mean, Neja too, but just of the films that we usually talk about making most of their money, a lot of their money in the United States and then internationally. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, in the era of reboots, spin-offs, sequels, prequels, you name it, we have a reboot of one of the most popular and most notorious and famous franchises in all of fantasy and all of fiction, and that is Harry Potter coming up. This reboot has admittedly been shrouded in a bit of controversy, of course, with J.K. Rowling herself, but then also the fact that they're rebooting a very beloved franchise when the originals, the originals were so beloved, and the originals' main actors, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson, are still relatively young, in their 30s, I believe. So it's an interesting move. It's an interesting idea to reboot the franchise so soon. But David Zaslav from Warner Brothers seems intent on continuing on this franchise and introducing it to a new audience. So lo and behold, we have an HBO Max reboot in the works. It's going to be basically the same kind of format as the original Harry Potter, where we're going to just have the three kids grow up. We just recently, a couple months ago, talked about the casting of these three kids: Dominic McLaughlin, Alistair Stout, and then Arabella Stanton as Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger. So we just had that going on, but also the fact that these three characters are going to grow up together for the next 10 years over, I think, 7 seasons is what they said. Maybe they'll do 8. Who knows? Maybe they'll kind of stretch out the last little bit as well. But that's all been fine, and it's all been more theoretical up until they cast the three actors. But now, surprisingly, to me at least, because this has all just been sort of up in the air and hand-wavy for a little bit now, surprisingly, they've just started filming. We have our first image of, I almost said Daniel Radcliffe. It is not Daniel Radcliffe. It is now a name that we should probably learn as the young actor, as long as he does well in the role, as long as the series takes off. He's going to have a lot of work as he ages up and grows into an adult. This is Dominic McLaughlin. as Harry Potter. We have our first image of Dominic McLaughlin as Harry Potter, as he, with that little, I forget what that's called, the thing that they clap, where they announce that filming is starting. But anyways, they have the announcement that filming has started. As of July 14th, 2025, filming on Harry Potter, the HBO Max series season 1 has begun, and he's also in costume. And I gotta say, I mean, I wouldn't have made a segment just if they had just released that picture, but there are a couple things here that are noteworthy enough to talk about. But first of all, let's just talk about the picture. He looks, I mean, somehow even more like Harry Potter than Harry Potter did, than Daniel Radcliffe did. And I'm basing this only off of the vague illustrations that we've had on cover art for the Harry Potter books, but also just the more traditional descriptions of Harry Potter. And somehow this looks like one of those book covers just came to life. And I'm not saying, I mean, of course, Daniel Radcliffe looked like Harry Potter because he is really the iconography of Harry Potter. It is him, right? But, I mean, you look at this kid and you go, yeah, I mean, just based on looks alone, because we have no idea how much acting experience he has and how good of an actor he is, but it's a young kid, and he looks very much like Harry Potter. Now, again, like I just said, looks alone are not going to make this role. You could have gotten thousands of kids across the world who could have put on this costume and looked exactly like Harry Potter in a lot of people's minds. So who knows, right? Who knows? But still, it's an exciting thing. Anyways, the more important thing to discuss in this segment is the fact that, yes, filming has started, and this is perhaps the most important thing to come out of it, HBO Max has set a tentative release window of 2027. Now let's extrapolate a little bit here. So this first season is filming now, and it's just started. So, you know, a season of television, especially an HBO kind of series, with as intensive as it is, let's just say it takes 2-3 months to film. So let's just say before October 2025, this series will have wrapped filming. Okay, that makes sense. And then they'll go into post-production, and they'll have all of 2026 to do post-production. But of course, they're going to be starting to film the second season probably next year, because this is just going to be a machine that keeps going unless this series just bombs, in which case we're, you know, not going to have many more seasons of this. But as long as this series continues to gain notoriety, and it looks like they've gotten the right people to do it with, the showrunners of Succession running this show. So it looks like it really has the right talent behind it, and they're just going to keep filming for the foreseeable future. So it's not like they're going to just sit on their hands for all of 2026 waiting, oh, is this show going to do well? Is it not going to do well? They're going to keep filming. So they're going to have most of 2026 to edit, but they're probably going to launch in about a year in filming season 2, as long as everything goes well. And so I would think, based on all of this, when HBO Max sets the tentative release window of 2027, we might be looking at maybe Christmas 2026 into 2027, or perhaps January, February 2027. I think this is going to come pretty early in 2027, which, yes, is a long way away. But if you think about it, the way that they're structuring this filming and these seasons, it looks like we're going to be getting a season pretty much every year, every 1.5 years ish, and that's exciting, because it's been a while since we've had shows just pump out content, not content per se, but pump out release dates and release new seasons every so often, because usually it takes 2-3 years between seasons, and by the time you get the new one, you kind of forget what happens in the old one. I felt that way about Severance, even though it was really quite easy to get back into it. So we'll see where this goes, but I think that the release date of 2027 is an exciting thing to think about. And I think that perhaps we might get it a little bit earlier. I would, at this point in time, I might wager Christmas 2026. It might be a Christmas show. We'll see about that. Guys, what do you think of this first image of Harry Potter, Dominic McLaughlin as Harry Potter, and the fact that the show has started to film and will release in 2027? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, it's not award season, actually. The award season, generally speaking, for movies and television is early on in the year, February, March-ish, but the Emmys are a notable exception. The Emmy nominations have just come out, and normally, we've only been doing the podcast daily for the last weekly, I suppose, but with daily segments for the last year or so, but we, generally I don't pay attention to the Emmys too much because I just hadn't been watching as much television, but this past year I've been watching a little bit more, and so I wanted to talk about some of the interesting things coming out of the Emmys for this year, for 2025. So let's go through, this is the 77th Emmys, and just talk about a couple of highlights here. We're not going to go through every single category like we did with the Oscars. I haven't seen nearly as many shows as proportionally as I did with the movies for the Oscars, but still I've seen enough to kind of have some thoughts here. So first of all, The Studio and Severance, two shows that I actually did see, leading the nominations here with Severance with 27 nominations and The Studio with 23. Severance, I think, is no surprise to me, because Severance is just that show that seems to be taking over pop culture in that way, where, and it's good. I'm good, subjectively, but I think that it's most people recognize that, understand its significance in pop culture, but also really like the show. And I think that that's leading to its nominations. And then the studio is interesting because I know that the Emmys aren't necessarily a popularity contest, but it kind of seems like it sometimes, at least with these big award shows. And so, the studio, I wasn't sure if enough people had caught on to the buzz of the studio because, look, I mean, it's not the funniest show that I've ever seen. It's not the most entertaining show that I've ever seen. I really had a good time watching it. And it's just, it's one of those shows where if you love movies and if you love TV, it's so fun to watch the behind the scenes satire and spoofing of all of it. And so I'm really glad personally to have seen the studio get those 23 nominations. Let's see here. The Bear also got nominated quite a bit, as per usual. But the other couple interesting things to note here. First of all, The Last of Us was nominated as well, Last of Us Season 2. But what's interesting about The Last of Us Season 2 being nominated is that Pedro Pascal was nominated for lead actor. And I think, right, spoilers for The Last of Us Season 2, I thought The Last of Us Season 2 was a mixed bag, to be quite honest with you. And I'm not really sure how they get us back on board with Season 3. I'm going to obviously watch Season 3, but it's going to be interesting. But Pedro Pascal's performance in it was phenomenal in my eyes. Especially Episode 6 for him, phenomenal. But he was nominated for Best Lead Actor. And I just don't agree with that. He was not in this show. I get it that he's on all the posters with Bella Ramsey and whatnot. He's not the lead actor of this season. Bella Ramsey is a lead actress, for sure. But Pedro Pascal is not a lead in this season. Someone pointed out, I think it was Dan Merrill pointed out, he's in 3 out of 7 episodes. That in itself, objectively speaking, because regardless of presence and whatnot, character arcs and things like that, character importance, just objectively, he's not in the show that much. And that's okay. I would have loved to have seen him get nominated for lead supporting actor. And I think he would have had a good shot, at least just in my opinion, but it's still, it's kind of crazy. So anyways, there's that. Harrison Ford also got nominated for Shrinking Season 2. That's amazing. Shrinking Season 2 is, first of all, one of my favorite seasons of TV in a while. Shrinking is just one of my favorite shows in a while. And Harrison Ford has never been better, I think, in as he is in Shrinking. And so I'm really happy for him for that. Jason Segel also getting nominated as well. One of the things that is also interesting is that Andor got nominated for lead drama series, I believe, but which is huge, by the way. It's almost like a Star Wars movie getting nominated for Best Picture in the TV world. But none of the cast got nominated, which is sad. I think Diego Luna definitely had a shot, Adria Arjona as well, and then Stellan Skarsgård. So it's kind of sad that they didn't get nominated for that. The Penguin has a lot of nominations as well. Penguin with Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti. The Penguin is getting a lot of buzz here, as it should, by the way. I think it's really good to see that these kinds of shows, the studio and Severance, for example, of being those kind of flashy shows that people glob onto, but also the comic book shows, the Star Wars shows, really being recognized. And it's a little disappointing that the actors for Andor were not recognized as well, but I still think it's a really big win that Andor itself got nominated for Best Lead Series, and the Penguin is getting a lot of love, it looks like, with these awards. So overall, it's a very, this is a very quick segment here, but highlighting that, again, I don't have, enough of the knowledge. I haven't seen enough of the shows to go through, this actor got snubbed and this show got snubbed. White Lotus also got a lot of nominations as well. But really, I wanted to take this time to just highlight that there are a lot of good shows that came out. I watched a few of them, and I'm really happy for Andor. I'm really happy for Severance, Shrinking, The Penguin, The Studio, a lot of really fun television shows that had come out over the last year. Interestingly, Squid Game Season 2 was not nominated for anything, I think, which is interesting. Even if you didn't like Squid Game Season 2, I would have thought that some of the acting categories it would have gotten nominated for and whatnot. So we'll see how Season 3 fares next year, but yeah, kind of an interesting thing there. So guys, those were some of the highlights from the Emmy nominations. What do you think about all of that? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, the DCU is in full swing like we've been talking about with Superman, and of course Creature Commandos came out a while ago in December, but sneakily, there's another project coming out very soon, and that is Peacemaker Season 2. We will be back on the HBO bandwagon doing all of the weekly reviews and spoiler discussions and whatnot for Peacemaker Season 2. I really enjoy Peacemaker Season 1, so I am very much looking forward to Peacemaker Season 2. However, one thing that I have had some questions about, to put it lightly, and perhaps even some mild trepidation, some cautiousness about, is the fact that Peacemaker Season 2 is Season 2. So we know that Marvel just recently did this with Deadpool and Wolverine being Deadpool 3, leading into the MCU, even though there were 2 previous films. that were not connected to the MCU specifically. And now the DCU is looking to do this directly from the DCEU, taking the exact season 1 of Peacemaker and basically making it almost all of it canon in the DCU and carrying it over. And James Gunn also said the Suicide Squad, which he directed, is also essentially canon for the most part in the DCU. And he has every right to recast Harley Quinn and redo all these characters and whatnot, but just for the most part, some of those characters like Rick Flag Jr. And his death at the hands of Peacemaker, that's all going to be canon. We talked about this a while ago, that the fact that he said anything that's mentioned in the DCU that's referencing events from those films and those TV shows is going to be canon from the DCEU. So that's all been fine. And honestly, that's been my underlying assumption, that's all that's going to happen, is that if a character mentions something from the DCEU, that is really the only part of the DCEU that's going to carry over. However, and we talked about this also a while ago, that James Gunn mentioned that Peacemaker Season 2 will directly address why some of the characters from Peacemaker Season 1 and the DCEU are transitioning over into the DCU. Because if you remember, those characters from Peacemaker, including Harcourt and Economos, were in other parts of the DCEU, including Black Adam and Shazam! Fury of the Gods, for example. And so it's not like we're just plucking everything from Peacemaker Season 1 and it's all, fine and dandy. I mean, there are some threads that are being pulled as well. James Gunn said that everything in Peacemaker Season 1 is canon except for the Justice League scene. Okay, fine. I don't know how he's going to explain that, but we might be getting some hints now because a new teaser trailer for Peacemaker Season 2 has been playing in front of Superman. And it did something. It perhaps revealed something that I frankly was not expecting at all to be the solution to this problem. We might be digging into different dimensions and the multiverse ? It's not explicitly the multiverse, but parallel dimensions is kind of the multiverse, let's be honest. It might be using the multiverse to justify this change. In a new teaser trailer for Peacemaker Season 2 that admittedly I haven't seen, because I haven't seen this trailer in front of Superman when I went to see Superman, but apparently there's a new teaser trailer of Peacemaker playing in front of Superman in select screenings, and in this trailer, Peacemaker outright says that they are part of a different dimension now in the DCU compared to the DCEU. The exact quote here that people have been posting online here is Peacemaker saying, quote, there's another dimension that's exactly the same as ours, but it's better. So there's a lot to unpack here. Because, first of all, I don't have any context for the scene. I don't know where he is saying this scene. Is he saying this scene in the DCEU? Is the DCEU going to kind of be canon as a universe in the DCU? Because when he says, there's another dimension that's exactly the same as ours, but it's better, well, pause. I mean, he's not saying that the DCEU is better than the DCU. Even if you guys think that, that's totally great. And everyone has is entitled to their opinion about that. But, I mean, John's saying that Peacemaker wouldn't be saying this out loud when he's, in the new DCU, right? So I would assume he's saying this in the old DCEU, which raises so many questions for me. And I guess Dimensions is fine. I mean, we have pocket universes and whatnot. It's fine. It's whatever, right? But I mean, this feels a whole lot more complicated than it needed to be. I don't really understand what's going on here. I'm waiting to see. I mean, either a new trailer come out, which I'm assuming a new trailer is going to come out in the next week or so with Comic-Con, but also just waiting to see in the show how they address this. Because frankly, I mean, I would have thought James Gunn would have wanted to avoid multiverse kind of thing. And again, I know it's not multi-universes. I know it's different dimensions, but it's effectively the same framing and narrative device, right? And I would have thought that James Gunn would have wanted to avoid this whole, it's a different universe and crossing the two over, because now you open a whole can of worms, right? Now the Snyder fans are going to be like, wait a second. And I'm not, again, I have no inherent hate for the DCEU and the Snyderverse and whatnot. I'm just pointing out the fact that if you open this can of worms, you're going to open and invite people to kind of jump in and be like, oh, wait a second, is it possible that Henry Cavill Superman is still out there? Even though I don't think we are ever going to see Henry Cavill Superman again. I'm just saying that as somebody who's looking at this more objectively. I don't think that's possible. But this is, I don't know. Is the first scene of Peacemaker Season 2 going to be him in the DCEU and then discovering that there's a different dimension and him being sucked into it? That's, I don't know. I don't know. Is that going to be a little weird? Is that going to be a little jarring? Maybe. But I just have no idea. Is Peacemaker Season 2 going to be a bridge series between the DCEU and the DCU? Frankly, I just think that that's going to be way more confusing than anything else. So, I don't know. I find this super interesting, and I don't know what to make of this. We're going to have to see how it's executed on in Peacemaker Season 2. But guys, this is unexpected, to say the least. And I don't know if this is the best solution. I'm somebody who says, let's wait and see. Let's see how it's executed on. But guys, I don't know what to make of this. What do you think about this news that apparently the DCEU is going to be referenced as an alternate dimension, and the DCU is going to be the quote-unquote better dimension in Peacemaker Season 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, I've said it so many times already, but we are in the post-Superman era of life, of the Access Blockbusters pod in particular. But what that means is that we have things to talk about now with Superman. Now, this segment in particular is not going to dive into any of the specifics in the story or the film itself of Superman. Rather, we're here to talk today about box office, which I don't always talk about box office, but I think when it pertains to interesting films, interesting trends and whatnot, I think it's really, it's fun to talk about it. And, with a film like Superman, launching a cinematic universe, financial dominance or financial success was not necessarily, I think, the be-all, end-all of whether this film was considered a success. I really do think, much in the same way how Thunderbolts really underperformed, but I still think was considered a success within Marvel, so much so that they tapped Jake Schreier, the director of Thunderbolts, to be the director of their X-Men film, which arguably is their most important film in a long time, maybe since Spider-Man Homecoming, maybe since Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame. The X-Men film is very important, and they tapped Jake Schreier because he did a great job with Thunderbolts. So, in a similar way, while Thunderbolts underperformed, I still think it was a success within Marvel, and I think that Superman similarly could have been seen the same way if it had not really performed up to box office expectations, but still had the same critical reaction. But we now, and I understand that when this segment is coming out, it's been over a week since the first weekend, so it's been about it's been about a week and a half, I guess, since the first weekend of Superman. But still, we're here to talk about what the first weekend can tell us, the first box office weekend can tell us about the trajectory of the film, and really the question that doesn't necessarily matter. Because if this film makes $999 million but doesn't make $1 billion, I don't think it makes a difference at all. But the question that seems to be on everyone's mind lately with box office success, can Superman make $1 billion? Again, if it makes $900 million, I think it's just as successful as if it made $1 billion. Really, really. But anyways, let's talk about the first weekend's box office. So Superman came in with its first weekend at $122 million domestically, which is very, very big. Now, for context, though, first of all, it's beating up basically every other superhero movie in the year, and I think Deadpool and Wolverine made more than that, but still, and Deadpool and Wolverine made over $1 billion, but it's a very big number. It's important to point out, though, that this number is not even close to the top of the superhero box office draws. You have films like, obviously, a lot of the Avengers films have all made well over that. Those films were in the $200 million range. Black Panther was in the $200 million range. Other films like Civil War, for example, were as well, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So Superman debuting at $122 million is a very, very, let's make no mistake about it, is a very, very good result. And so much so that James Gunn, Peter Safran, and David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers, have come out and celebrated this, as they should. It is a very, very robust number, especially given the fact that, for example, comparing the Avengers films, those were coming off of massive momentum, huge films, and people were so excited for them that, yes, of course, they were going to make super ridiculous amounts of money. I think Avengers Endgame had an opening weekend of like $300 million, which is unbelievably insane. So Superman coming in at $122 million, given the fact that people had reservations about the DC brand just based on the DCEU, and we were launching a new cinematic universe, and I think James Gunn's, I don't know if any of the Guardians films have made over $122 million, but none of them have made $1 billion. I don't believe. No, none of them have made $1 billion. And so this is, there are a lot of things working against the fact that this is not going to have the same kind of ceiling as a maybe an Avengers film, for example. But again, a very good result. It's also important to compare this, though, to other DC films in particular, though we will discuss how this might differ from some of the other DC films. So looking at a couple statistics here, comparing it to Batman v Superman, Batman v Superman had an opening weekend of $166 million, so over $40 million more than Superman. The Dark Knight opened to $160 million. And again, this is not adjusted for inflation, so this was many years ago at this point, almost 10 years ago for Batman v Superman. Crazy. Actually, almost 10 years ago. And The Dark Knight coming out about 15 years ago. And actually, now I'm looking at these numbers. The Dark Knight Rises, made $160 million. And The Dark Knight made $158.4 million. The Batman, which came out a couple years ago, and actually is an interesting comparison, made $134 million. So made a little more than Superman did here. what's interesting to note about these films, though, is let's look at where these films topped out at. So, first of all, The Batman came out in 2022, made $134 million, and capped out at about $700 million. Importantly, what's important to note is that this film was still coming out at the tail end of the pandemic. This film was beloved. The Batman was beloved, just as the Superman film is beloved. But it came out at the tail end of the pandemic, and so while this $134 million number is higher than the opening weekend of Superman, which I think was just because people were excited to see The Batman, I think that it capped out at about $700 million because A, it was introducing a new iteration of Batman, and B, I think that the people who really wanted to go see this movie in theaters, right, who felt like it was safe and wanted to go, went opening weekend and the next weekend, and probably didn't. I feel like people who were going to stay home because of safety concerns, because they weren't ready to go back to theaters, didn't really come after that. So this film topped out at $700 million. If The Batman came out, everything else being equal, in 2019, could it have made $1 billion? I still don't think so, but maybe it comes in $850 million as well. The Dark Knight Rises, I believe The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises both made $1 billion. I think. I could be wrong. I know that The Dark Knight made $1 billion. And those films started out at 158.4 and $160 million. So again, they had a big head start with in comparison to Superman. Because even a tens of millions of dollars in this case makes a difference in terms of the head start that these films have to $1 billion. And then Batman v Superman opened the biggest of all of these Batman comparison films. I don't know why we're just comparing Batman films, but I guess these are the more recent films to compare it to with similar numbers. I think the Man of Steel made something like $116 million opening weekend. And so not Man of Steel, Superman made more than Man of Steel did opening weekend, which is important to note as well. But again, looking at Batman v Superman, it made $166 million opening weekend, but capped out at $800 million worldwide. Now, the difference between Batman v Superman and this Superman film is that Batman v Superman was not well received, and so people probably didn't go back as many times in theaters as they would have for maybe the Superman film. So here's what Superman has working for it. Number one, it has positive momentum. People want to go see this movie, right? And internationally, by the way, it generated, I think, $95 million. And so it is at about $217 million as of the close of the opening weekend for Superman. $217 million. That's a big head start. And it hasn't opened in all global markets, just as most films in the United States don't open in all global markets at the same time. So it is at a very big number. $217 million is a big number, right? It's a huge head start. That being said, is that enough to get it to $1 billion when films like Black Panther open $200 million domestically, for example, and clear the $1 billion mark? I don't think so. Because look, Batman v Superman makes $166 million. That is enough of a head start to get it to $1 billion if the film was received well, and it wasn't, right? And so it tops out at $800 million. This Superman film doesn't have that problem. People seem to generally really enjoy this film. And what I think is different about the Superman film as well is that it has repeat value for not just adults, but for kids. This Superman film is, I think, pretty much appropriate for all ages. It's a 4-quadrant movie, and it's coming out in the dead middle of summer. Batman v Superman came out in March. And so I think that this film has a lot of things going for it. That being said, though, $122 million and $200 million worldwide as a debut, while really strong numbers, and Superman should be, the people making Superman, Warner Brothers, should be celebrating this, I do not think has the ceiling of $1 billion at this point in time, unless it has insane legs heading into the next few weeks. And we remember, Fantastic Four First Steps is coming out in 2 weeks, so we'll have to see how that number, how those numbers affect Superman. But I do think that this film has a cap. I think that this film will cap out at a maximum of probably $800 million is my guess. And that is with really big momentum, continuing word of mouth, and people going to see this film. Realistically, I think this film can make about $650 to $700 million, which is, I think, right around where my updated predictions were when we did our updated box office predictions for the rest of 2025 a couple months ago. And I think that I said Superman could make $700 million, and I still think that it can. I think, though, that is probably around where we're going to tap out. Like, the most likely outcome, in my opinion, is in that $600 to $700 million range, which, by the way, for a first film in the DCU, with new actors, new characters, new universe, new everything, with the negative momentum that the DCEU is giving it, is a really good number. So you should not take this, for me, answering the question of, is Superman going to make $1 billion? In my opinion, no, I don't think it has a very good chance of doing that. Should not take that as a negative comment. I think Superman making $700 million, or even $600 million, or even $500 million, based on this word of mouth, is a huge win for DC. So I think for now, I'm going to stick with my predictions of between $650 and $700 million. And I think that is something that DC should be very, very proud of. So we will see based on the trends, and we'll probably do an update as Superman closes out, its box office run, but still a very encouraging start for Superman. Guys, what do you think of these initial first weekend box office numbers for Superman? Do you think still, after a 122 million domestic opening weekend and a 217 million worldwide opening, that Superman can hit $1 billion? Still, let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, Superman has kicked off the DCU, but we have a whole lot more in store for us in the coming months, in the coming years, actually in the coming month, singular, as Peacemaker Season 2 is on the horizon. However, I think post-Superman, it's what might be just as interesting as the build-up anticipation to the DCU's arrival. And yes, we're not forgetting Creature Commandos, but really, let's not kid ourselves. Superman was the real start to the DCU, the James Gunn's rebooted DCU, rebooting the Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot DCEU into this new David Cornsweet DCU. But anyways, the post-Superman era, I think, is going to be much more not much more interesting, but just as interesting as the pre-Superman era because of all the post-mortems, all the different things that we can glean from the film, the box office results, which we talked about last week, and or this week rather, this week in the Access Blockbusters pod. All the dates are getting mixed up with me, but the reviews have been really positive, and fan responses and how people are taking the DCU. And so a Variety article has come out here and discusses a lot of things. Now, the headline of this segment and a lot of news articles are pointing to two very specific things, but honestly, I would recommend that if you're interested at all in the analysis of Superman and sort of the behind the scenes, what people are responding to, what people are interested in, what people are even angry about, I would recommend reading this article. We're not going to dive into every single thing here. For example, the article touches on the conflict in the Middle East, as there is a parallel in the film, and points out the fact that James Gunn actually turned in his script before October 2023. So anyways, there's a lot of really interesting things here about just how people are receiving the film. Obviously, there's been some discourse about the fact that this is, Superman is an immigrant in the film. So a lot of interesting things. If you are so inclined to read the article, that is all in there. We are not going to dive into that in this segment, not because I don't care about those things, but because this is not the channel we're not really discussing those kinds of topics in this channel. But again, I would highly recommend reading this article. It is a very interesting read. Anyways, all that to say, there are, like we said, a couple nuggets in this article that, people have been pointing to, as potentially revealing a couple things. So first of all, it's important to point out that these two little nuggets in this article are kind of buried. One might be tempted to say, well, is it really reporting? Can we really make an entire segment out of this? Can we really talk about this as if it's concrete? And the answer to that is, well, we're not going to take anything as concrete until DC comes out and says it, although we did a segment last week where James Gunn did talk about the Batman Part 2 script, but Variety is one of those news sources when you're talking about movie news that is one of the more reputable sources. Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, The Wrap, etc. Those sources, when they say things, they are usually spot on with their sources. And so the two things that are coming out of this article from Variety, and the title, if you want to check it out, is "A New Day for DC: Breaking Down Superman's Salaries, Budgets, and More as Studio Fast Tracks Wonder Woman and the Future." And so one of those things is in the title. They are fast tracking Wonder Woman, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The other thing is that not just James Gunn, because James Gunn, we talked about last week, is thrilled, it seems like, or he says that the Batman 2 script is great, is what he said. It was a very quick passing comment. If you watch the actual clip, he just answers, it's great, and then he walks away. So not a whole lot to glean from that, but still, it's encouraging that he liked it. But this article from Variety seems to indicate that the entire studio is behind the script, meaning everybody on board seemed to be very much thrilled with the script itself. That is a good thing. That is a very good thing. So let's get that part out of the way. The Batman Part 2 script, people seem to be really excited about it. Actually, Colin Farrell, we're not doing an entire script, or not an entire segment about this, because he's really reiterating a lot of things that we've already heard of. Oh yeah, they might be doing Penguin Season 2 and I'd be interested, and I haven't read the script yet for Batman Part 2, is essentially what Colin Farrell just said. But he also did say that Matt Reeves is such a gifted writer, and he's super excited to get to be able to sit down and read the script. And it seems like the studio is thrilled with it. Now, there's been a lot of discourse, right? In our segment last week where we talked about James Gunn being happy with the Batman Part 2 script, there was a lot of discourse in the comments about the fact that people were wondering, is Pattinson's Batman still going to be a part of the DCU, or is it going to be separate? And my stance with this, I've done entire segments about this is still that it is not a good idea to put Pattinson in the DCEU. I just think let Reeves' universe be Reeves' universe, and let the DCU cast its own Batman. I think it would be fine. I point out, because people point out to me, they say to me, well, people are going to get confused, if there's 2 Batmen running around. To which I respond, in 2023, there were 3 Batmen in 2 universes running around. Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck in the DCEU, and Pattinson as well. So, again, I just don't really buy the argument that people are going to be confused if there's multiple different iterations. But anyways, I digress. So it looks like they're very excited regardless for the Batman Part 2, and we will see where that goes. And the other thing to talk about here is that they are fast-tracking Wonder Woman. Now, the DCU is operating a little bit differently because Marvel doesn't necessarily fast-track projects, right? Comparing the MCU to the DCU. They have a plan. They have a set plan. And while it seems like they're starting to be a little more flexible, especially with TV shows, they don't, they know that Spider-Man 4 is happening. They know that Shang-Chi 2 is happening. They know that Black Panther 3 is happening. But it's not as if all of a sudden they get, this idea for Squirrel Girl, and all of a sudden Squirrel Girl is going to get fast-tracked. If it doesn't fit in the plans, and we don't know if Kevin Feige's, behind the scenes, right? Maybe he would see a really compelling Squirrel Girl script. It's just an example. And it fits in with the plans for the MCU moving forward. It fits in with the X-Men movie. And he's like, great, we're going to fast track it. But it seems like he rarely does that. With James Gunn, it seems like the writing and the script is priority. And if they have an idea, and also it seems like David Zaslav and Warner Brothers are really pushing for the trinity of DC characters, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, to come back to the big screen. Because if you remember, in the initial announcement for the DCU for Gods and Monsters Chapter 1, James Gunn did not announce Wonder Woman. He announced Paradise Lost, an HBO show set on Themyscira. And so now it looks like they're really shifting their priorities towards, let's get Wonder Woman going. It seems like if this is the case, then they have a script, and that's one of the reasons why they're fast-tracking the movie. So I think that this is a good thing, and I think it's an exciting thing. I think that if they are prioritizing Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, as long as we get really solid iterations of the 3, which I think we're 1/3 of the way there. I enjoyed David Cornsweet very much, and I think that we'll have to see how that plays. Again, we didn't think Clayface was going to be coming in 2026. Lo and behold, Clayface will be the 3rd DCU movie. So it all just depends, I think, on what James Gunn finds interesting and what he finds compelling at a given time. And we'll have to see if Wonder Woman pans out after being fast-tracked as one of the projects for the DCU in the near future. So guys, what do you make of these comments from Variety that the DCU is fast-tracking Wonder Woman, and it is, or rather the studio is, thrilled with the Batman Part 2 script? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, we are in the post-Superman era. Can you guys believe it? It's crazy. It's crazy. And with the post-Superman era, as we look forward to Comic-Con, because I'm sure we're going to get a little bit more clarity about what the future of the DCU, James Gunn's new DCU, holds. I'm sure we'll get, at least, I don't know if James Gunn will do that whole Kevin Feige get on stage and reveal every single project coming out for the next 5 years. I don't know. Maybe. We have a pretty good idea. Next year, looks like we're getting Lanterns as an HBO show. Looks like we're getting Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, just Supergirl now, and Clayface. And I think that's about it for the live action projects. And so, we'll look forward to what comes next. Sergeant Rock, eventually, Batman Brave and the Bold, Booster Gold, and there's a Bane and Deathstroke movie. So lots of interesting things in the pipeline, as well as all those projects floating around like Swamp Thing and Paradise Lost and the Wonder Woman movie. So lots of things, even if they're not coming out in the immediate future, a lot of things to get excited about. And we have now a Wall Street Journal article that claims to have some interesting information. I don't think a lot of it is surprising per se, but just some clarity perhaps. This is not coming from James Gunn's mouth directly. It's coming from the Wall Street Journal, but still, it's an interesting article, and Wall Street Journal, in this instance, is perhaps more, it's in maybe a little bit more in line with the Hollywood Reporters or the Deadlines or Varieties of, you want to pay attention to these bigger publications, and it's not the same as a leak or a scooper, but it's still just a report, and so we'll wait to see if James Gunn will clarify any of that. So I'm reading here actually from I think this is Total Film. Total Film is quoting the Wall Street Journal article, and they just have some analysis and some takeaways from it. So I'm just going to read from this article here. Quote, per a news report by the Wall Street Journal, Gunn and Safran are aiming to release 1 animated and 2 live-action movies per year, along with multiple TV shows. I think what the article said, I read somewhere else, was 2 live-action shows and 1 animated show as well. I think. Could be wrong about that. But, that's in the ballpark. Continuing on with this quote. Their ultimate goal, according to the publication, is to eventually, this is quoting from the article directly, reestablish all the company's best-known characters, including Batman and Wonder Woman, and unite them in a new Justice League film. And so then they go on to talk about Superman, whatnot. And then later on in the article, I believe that they talk about the idea that they might even be interested in doing a Mr. Terrific and not together, but two separate spin-off shows of Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen from Superman. So that's interesting. Again, we're not going to talk about spoilers for Superman in this particular segment, so don't worry if you haven't checked it out yet. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? If this is the strategy. I mean, first of all, it's sort of a no-duh kind of moment of, oh yes, of course, you want to reestablish all the characters and put them in a Justice League film. That seems fairly obvious. I think we could have all guessed that to a certain extent. Whether or not they were going to do a traditional Justice League movie or whatnot, I think it was pretty clear that they weren't going to be too unconventional at first. I mean, James Gunn is indeed starting out his new universe with Superman, so you can kind of tell that it's pretty important to him. He also said, we're doing Wonder Woman. He's been talking about Brave and the Bold. So yeah, it's pretty clear to me that Justice League is the priority. In terms of the sheer amount of projects, so 2 live-action movies and 1 animated movie, I don't know. Because what James Gunn said, I actually just rewatched the original announcement that he made in 2023, I believe January 2023. And in that announcement, he said that all mediums, so animation, movies, TV shows, live action, animated, unless specific, and he even included games in there, by the way, unless specifically designated as otherwise, will be a part of this same continuity. And if it's not part of that same continuity, it will be delineated as Elseworlds. And so I'm assuming these animated films that'll be released, which I think Dynamic Duo is one of them that's going to be coming out, will be part of this DCU timeline. And we'll have to see, we'll have to see how that works. But in terms of sheer amount of content, I think it works, right? It'll, I don't think it's overloaded. It's not like they're saying we're going to release 5 movies a year and 5 shows like Marvel did in 2021, for example. It was a lot for sure. But it is still a lot of content, right? If you think about two live action shows and 2 movies, even just that alone, I think is probably the upper limit of what I would want to see from DC, just starting out their universe at the very least. And to me, I've always had the question, because Marvel, to me, one of the interesting things about Marvel right now, and one of the questions I continue to have is, how are you going to handle your TV shows in light of the fact that it seems like, I mean, it's just statistically, not everybody goes to watch the TV shows and then is confused when these TV characters show up in the movies. And so I'm just curious to see how James Gunn will handle it, because there already is going to be overlap. Guy Gardner, who was in Superman, is going to be in Lanterns, right? So there is going to be some level of crossover. And the question is, how well our audience is going to respond to that? How well is that going to work out? I don't know. Right now, it seems like all of these characters are sort of in different corners of the universes. And so so we'll see if there's a way to make it so that audiences really grasp onto all of these different aspects, because it will become a little bit hard when all these projects are very disparate and in different mediums to see how audiences respond and if they will. Because imagine if you had an animated dynamic duo film and a live action show of Lanterns and Supergirl and Swamp Thing and Superman, and all these projects are individually really well liked, but then you put them all together in a film. And you have an animated Blue Beetle film as well, and you throw him in there, which is he's played by Jolo Mardueña, who was also the Blue Beetle from the DCEU. So you throw all of them in the movie, and people are like, "Wait, that guy was from the DCEU," or not? They probably won't call it the DCEU if they're not paying attention to DC as closely as we are. But hey, that guy was from the same universe that the Suicide Squad was in. If they're talking about Peacemaker, but he's here again. Hey, wait a second, wasn't there that animated film with Robin in it? Is this the same guy? So that's really my biggest question moving forward with the DCU, and we'll just have to see. Time will tell how James Gunn will handle it. But guys, what do you think about this report? 2 live-action movies, 1 animated movie, 2 live-action shows, we think, and 1 animated show per year. We'll see how that turns out. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, it seems like just yesterday that we were talking about our hopes and predictions for Superman because, well, it was pretty much just yesterday. It was only a couple weeks ago that we were talking about our hopes and predictions for Superman, and we don't have any time to breathe because last week was our Superman review, and this week are our hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. The summer movie train, especially in the superhero universe, does not stop, and I love this. There's this concept, even some of my friends, right? Not even the people online, but even some of my friends are like, yeah, I'm a big Marvel fan, and I don't want to, I don't want to watch the DC movie, not because they hate DC inherently, but just because they feel like they can only watch Marvel movies. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, let's love both. I'm excited for both. You can go watch my review for Superman. I didn't adore the movie. It's not going to be one of my top 5 favorite movies or top 5 favorite comic book movies of all time, but I really liked it. I liked it, and I'm really happy that we got a movie like that, and I'm really happy that we're getting another movie like Fantastic Four First Steps that I hope is going to be great, and we'll talk about my hopes and predictions in just a second. So I love this. I love that we're getting to talk about Superman in one breath and then Fantastic Four the next breath. And I hope that it continues. Maybe Supergirl moves up to May of next year, but maybe not. Maybe we'll get Supergirl and Spider-Man and it'll be really great, and then Clayface and Doomsday close to each other. I'm excited. I'm really excited. So today, though, we're going to be talking about my hopes and predictions for the Fantastic Four First Steps. The hopes being some criteria, not criteria necessarily, but some items here that I think if the movie hits on all of these, it has a very good chance of being a good movie in my eyes, because your criteria might be different than mine, and that's totally okay. But these are things that I've been thinking about and I'm hoping for. And then predictions are more so regardless of whether I think that it'd be a good thing if they happen, things that I do think will happen. And I'm not going to go as boring, I'm not going to be like, Ben Grimm says it's clobbering time, because of course he will. But, these are a little more out there. Some are more conventional, but some are more wacky or more bold. So just to make things a little bit more fun as well. So let's get into my hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. Hope number 1, the family is key. This feels like, no-brainer, right? This is Marvel's first family. The whole family aspect is a big part of the trailers, and even Franklin Richards, the baby, is a big part of it. But, I mean, it may be an obvious thing, but I think this is the single most important thing that this film has to do. The family is the key to this movie. If they do not make the family work, this movie, I think, falls down. And maybe it doesn't fall down to the point where it completely collapses, but it's gonna stumble. This family has to work. The chemistry has to work. The emotional center of this movie has to be the way that they care about each other as a family unit. I don't think the movie's going to fail if that doesn't work, but if we walk out of this movie going, yeah, it was a solid superhero movie, but, the Fantastic Four as a unit, they were okay. I think we're off to a bad start. So, and by bad start, I mean for their tenure in the MCU. So I really think that for the future of the MCU, but also for this movie in particular, the family has to be the key. Number 2. Hopefully, this movie is not too goofy. And stop me if you've heard that before, because we did the exact same prediction pretty much for Superman. And turns out Superman delivered on that aspect. Superman, I was worried, was going to be just too goofy. And it turns out that, while the jokes in Superman didn't land all the time for me, I was never in the movie going, oh my gosh, this is so cringy and there's too many jokes and things. Never. Superman did a good job. And Fantastic Four is different because the trailers have not promised us, oh, jokey, Thor Love and Thunder, jokey. But goofy, I think, is more of the fact that Superman and Fantastic Four First Steps are similar in the way that they're both really leaning into the comic book aspects of these properties. Fantastic Four First Steps takes place in an alternate universe, and it's a very comic booky universe. So the costumes, and we're going to see Mole Man and Galactus is walking around. I'm presuming it's New York City, but maybe not, or whatever version of New York City that is. It's very comic booky. And comic booky is not inherently bad. It's not inherently bad, but I think that there's a balance, right, of alienating general audiences who come into the movie. I'm sure that there were general audience members who went into Superman and were like, why is there a guy with a bowl cut? That guy, no pun intended, but a guy with a bowl cut and a hawk girl and a guy with a mask who has little mini orbs and giant kaiju. I'm sure there are people like that. And, luckily for Superman, it didn't seem to alienate most people. And I'm hoping that Fantastic Four First Steps doesn't do the same, because they're really leaning into the costumes. They're really leaning into the fighting these villains and Galactus and Silver Surfer. So I'm hoping that it doesn't feel too goofy, too comic booky, and it doesn't alienate people in that regard. I have faith, though. Matt Shackman, I have faith. Number 3, my hope is that Galactus is not boring. Galactus is a hard character, because how do you make a planet-eating god being interesting? And one way to do it is do what you did with the Fantastic Four films with Chris Evans and Jessica Alba, and Griffith and Michael Chiklis. You can just make him a giant cloud. And that is not necessarily the best way to do it, as evidenced by those films. But, it's one way to do it, because you just make Galactus a kind of entity, which, okay, is what it is. You can do the option of making him this giant face in the sky that says, I will devour you and your planet, whatever. That also is what it is. Or you can do what Fantastic Four First Step seems to be doing, which is the more human, quote-unquote, human-sized Galactus. And by human, you mean, obviously, giant Godzilla-sized Galactus. But that is one way to do it, right? These are all different ways of doing Galactus, or at least traditionally. And I hope that my hope is that with seeing that Galactus is going to be more of a person, more of a character in the film, that he's not just this guy who's walking around like, I will eat you. Because, I don't know, forces of nature as villains are sometimes interesting in comic book movies, but more often than not, I think they're a little bit boring. to be honest with you. And so I'm hoping that while I don't need Galactus' entire backstory and his children and wife died in a terrible accident and he's out for revenge on a planet, I don't know. I don't need that necessarily. I hope there's a little bit more to him. Just like how I was hoping that there would be a little bit more for Ultraman, for example. And we're obviously not going to spoil who Ultraman is in Superman in this video, but just as an example for my predictions for Superman, in the same way, I'm hoping that there is a little bit more to Galactus than just, I'm going to eat your planet. So that's my third hope. And fourth hope, this is actually a hope that I had for Captain America Brave New World for Sam Wilson, where I said I hope he can show us that he can lead the Avengers in future films. I hope these characters prove that they can really lead the next wave of Marvel with the X-Men. Because it really seems like these characters are going to be part of the next big wave of the MCU, and I'm excited for that personally. But again, kind of tying back to the family aspect, if we walk out of this movie going, it was fine, they were fine, I think we're in trouble again, right? It's the same thing of if you walked out of the Avengers, the first Avengers, going, yeah, they're fine, then I think Marvel's in trouble. A little bit. Not desperate trouble, but it's just not the move or not the momentum that they would have wanted. So I hope that we can walk out of this movie saying, these characters, I'm so excited to see them be at the very forefront of whatever's next in the MCU. So those are my 4 hopes. And 4 predictions to wrap things up. Number 1, I'm predicting that Franklin Richards, the baby of Sue and Reed, is going to be the MacGuffin of the movie. I don't think this is a big stretch, to be quite honest with you. I think the idea of, adding the subtitle First Steps is very clearly an indication of babies, right? The first steps of Franklin Richards. And I think that Galactus, it's probably not a stretch to say that, Galactus is going to want Franklin for something. What that something is, I don't know. But, and he, in the comics, he's a very, very powerful character in the MCUs, or in the Marvel comics. So I think that he's probably going to be the MacGuffin at some point in the movie. Number 2, and this one I'm worried about, and I think will come true, but we'll see. Maybe this can come true and it still won't be a big deal. I think 2 out of the 4 members are going to feel sidelined. And I think that it's just hard, right? When you have 4 characters that arguably all could be the lead character, although you obviously want to prioritize Reed Richards and Sue Storm. It looks like Sue Storm is going to be the main character out of the 4, if there is one, but, Reed as well. I have a feeling that we're all going to come out of the movie saying, yeah, these 2 characters, really great, a lot of great development. The other 2, it is what it is. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to tank the movie, because I came out of Thunderbolts saying, I love Thunderbolts. Ghost and Taskmaster and U.S. Agent, what were they doing, really? Really. And even Bucky to a certain extent in that movie. So I don't think it's a bad thing if we come out and just say, for example, loved Reed, loved Sue. Johnny and Ben, they were fine. They were fun. Or loved Sue. I think Sue Storm is going to steal the movies, to be quite honest with you. Sue Storm, loved Sue, loved Ben. Johnny and Reed, yeah, they were fine. I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen. I don't want that to happen. I want to come out of the movie saying, I loved all 4 of them. But, I think that really, to me, the 4 of them together, like I said earlier with my hopes, is more important than any one of them individually. But still, it's my prediction. So, third prediction, Doctor Doom, Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom, does not show up in the main movie. I do think, and I would have said this, honestly, for any MCU movie coming out right before Doomsday. I guess it was going to be Fantastic Four, but now it's going to be Spider-Man Brand New Day. So maybe not. But I think that he will, I think that any movie coming out right before Doomsday is probably going to feature Doctor Doom in the post-credits, especially because Doctor Doom is the villain of the Fantastic Four. So I do think that he will show up in the post-credits, but that's not my prediction. My prediction is that he's not going to show up in the actual movie. I just don't think that he will have a role to play in that. However, as a bonus, as part of this third prediction here, I do think he is the one in that Fantastic Four ship from Thunderbolts. Kevin Feige recently said that it may or may not be the Fantastic Four in that ship. He said he was hinting towards it not being them. And I think that we'll find out why in this post-credit scene, why. And I do think it will be Doctor Doom in that ship. So we'll see. We will see what happens there. And my final prediction, this is an interesting one. The destruction of the Fantastic Four universe happens way earlier in the movie than we think, and the finale is not going to be taking place in that universe. So one of the things that seems like it's being forecasted from this movie, just based on the fact that the Fantastic Four have to enter the sacred timeline, it seems like, as part of the MCU and a part of Avengers Doomsday, and it looks like the Fantastic Four ship is hinting at that as well at the end of Thunderbolts. And so it looks like, and also just based on the trailers as well, it seems like their universe and their Earth at the very least is set up for destruction, because that is what Galactus does, and Galactus eats planets, and their Earth looks like it's a goner. That their entire universe looks like it's probably a goner. But my thought is that, it seems almost too obvious, right? It seems like this is not something that's going to happen at the very end of the movie and they're just going to forecast this in the trailers, right? There are some shots that look like they're alluding to that as well in the trailer. And so my prediction is that it's actually going to happen much earlier in the film. I don't think it's going to happen in the first 10 minutes or anything like that. But I think that it's going to happen to set up whatever's going on in the third act, rather than being the culmination of the third act, if that makes sense. It's a random and kind of wild prediction, but that is just something I have a hunch about. So those are my 4 predictions and 4 hopes for Fantastic Four First Steps. Actually, no pun intended. I didn't even realize that. I usually like to do 4 and 4. If I do 3 and 3 or 5 and 5, it happens. But I actually didn't realize we did 4 hopes and 4 predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. Guys, what are your hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, 2025 is over halfway done. We have seen so many great movies, so many amazing television shows, some disappointments as well for sure, but still lots of greatness coming. But to me, the project, the movie or show that I am most excited about is not even Fantastic Four. It's not even Wicked Part 2, although I am crazy excited about Wicked Part 2. It's not Avatar. It's not, it wasn't Superman. It wasn't Thunderbolts. It's Stranger Things Season 5. Stranger Things will always hold a special place in my heart. When the pandemic started, I've said this before a few times on the YouTube channel, but when the pandemic started, I hadn't really been watching a whole lot of TV. To be quite honest with you, the only real TV show, modern day TV show, live action show that I had watched before the pandemic was really Daredevil Season 1, 2, and 3, along with Defenders. Before that, I was mostly animation. I'd watched a lot of Clone Wars and a lot of cartoons as well. But the idea of sitting down and going on Netflix or HBO Max or Disney Plus, which it did exist at the time actually, to watch shows, I guess Mandalorian as well, to be fair. But the idea of sitting down and watching a show like that, I hadn't really done that. But obviously we all had a lot of time on our hands. And so the first show that I sat down to watch after the pandemic was Stranger Things. And Stranger Things, it holds a special place in my heart because I loved those 3 seasons when I watched them. I could not wait for season 4. I just absolutely could not wait for season 4. When it came in 2022, was beyond excited, over the moon, and I really enjoyed it. And I know I've heard this common refrain from a lot of people that they just think Stranger Things kind of jumped the shark and it was a little overrated and they didn't like season 3. And that's fine. That's totally fine. I understand that season 3 is a little bit different. It's a little more goofy and campy. I like how each season goes through a different season of just general holidays. And season 1 was Christmas time, right? Christmas time. Season 2 was Halloween. Season 3 was 4th of July. Season 4 was just season 4. But I think that I like that each season has a slightly different tone, and season 3 was more of the summer camp vibe. So anyways, I personally really like season 3. Every single time, not every single time, it's only happened once, but I watched the show initially, I rewatched it again, and then right before season 4 came out, I rewatched it again. And I very well might, before season 5 comes out, just rewatch the entire show again, because it means that much to me. I'm super excited. And so Stranger Things season 5 has been one of my most anticipated shows for such a long time. And we've finally gotten a full-length teaser trailer. It's not even a teaser trailer, it's just a trailer, to be honest with you. And I'll be honest with you, I was nervous, right? Because it's one of the most anticipated things for me. But, it's a trailer. A trailer is a trailer. No matter how good or how bad it is, it's not going to make or break a movie or show for me, especially one that I am going to see no matter what, right? And so I watched it early in the morning when it came out, on my phone, admittedly. And I was like, oh, yeah, good. And then later on, right before I recorded this segment, I sat down again and watched it on my big monitor. And I had a completely different experience. So I came to the conclusion that watching it on your phone with kind of low audio was perhaps not the best way to have seen the trailer for the first time, because I just watched it again and it got me pumped up. Before we get into the trailer itself, and there are some there are some interesting things to take away from the trailer. Let's read the official plot synopsis that Netflix released for the season. I think that also is an interesting thing, indication of where this season is taking place and what's going on. So this is officially from Netflix. It says, quote, "Picking up in the fall of 1987, Stranger Things 5 finds the town scarred by the opening of the rifts, and our heroes are unified by a single goal: to find and kill Vecna. But he has vanished, his whereabouts and plans unknown." Blah, 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 a little bit of filler text here. Complicating their mission, the government has placed the town under military quarantine and intensified the hunt for 11, forcing her back into hiding. As the anniversary of Will's disappearance approaches, so does a heavy familiar dread. The final battle is looming, and with it a darkness more powerful and more deadly than anything they faced before. To end this nightmare, they'll need everyone, the full party, standing together one last time. And so this trailer, to me, reflects everything in that synopsis, because it looks like everybody is in danger of dying. We all kind of knew that. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's almost like a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 situation where when nobody died, I was shocked because everyone in the cast seemed to be like, no, this is it. This is the final ride. And who knows? James Gunn was like, who knows who's going to die? And nobody did, which is interesting because it really does seem like from this trailer, it really does seem like from the synopsis that everyone's in danger. You see Hopper throwing grenades, right? You see, there's one shot of Nancy who has blood on her hands and she's crying. It looks like someone had just recently died and she's crying. So I don't know. Is it Steve? Is it Jonathan? I don't know. We see shots of Will and Mike and Lucas, and it's everyone just in such despair, I guess. And I love the ending as well, where they're all looking up and Vecna is just kind of rising from the shadows. It's great. And the intensity of it as well. I love the ending, just flashes of everyone's faces as it goes by. And I think that this season, is going to go bigger. It's going to swing bigger. It does have some of those core roots, though, I think, of season 1. That's one thing that the Duffer Brothers, the showrunners of Stranger Things, had wanted to go for, was really going back to the roots of season 1. So you see a lot more Demogorgons, right? Just straight up Demogorgons, like the one we saw. The one that was basically the main villain in season 1, right? It was just that one Demogorgon for the most part. And they've really expanded since then with the bats and the Demodogs and Vecna, obviously, and the Mind Flayer. But it was really just one Demogorgon. It looks like Demogorgons are really going to make an appearance again as main antagonists. There are a lot of them running around in this trailer. So that's exciting to me. But again, it seems like we're heading back. The party is unified, which is something from the synopsis and it seems like from the trailers. And that's something I'm very excited about. But I just think that, I don't know. I mean, I'm expecting to have my heart ripped out. I'm expecting to laugh, but also to feel just the epic weight of all of it. And I hope that, because what the Duffer Brothers said is that Stranger Things 5 is going to be basically 8 movies, which is crazy. I'm so excited for 8 full, 2-hour episodes of just madness and insanity and emotion, because I really think that if there is anybody who can deliver, I maintain that the Duffer Brothers know how to end a season better than almost anybody. The endings of seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Stranger Things have been some of the best conclusions to seasons, even in the shakier moments, even in the shakier seasons. Even season 3, which I admit is probably my least favorite season, even though I really like it, they still know how to end their shows. I mean, the ending of season 4 was absolutely insane. And so I am very much looking forward to this still. I think that, I think Will is going to be a very big character as he was in season 1, obviously. And I think that a lot is going to happen. I wonder what's going to happen to Max, to Sadie Sink's character. And we're here. We're, I think, less than 5 months away from the first volume of Stranger Things 5 coming out. I think it's coming out Thanksgiving. I cannot wait. What do you guys think of this first teaser trailer for Stranger Things season 5? Let me know in the comments down below. And everybody, that will do it for episode number 87 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us again. What a wild ride it's been. We're going to head into Fantastic Four. We will talk about that, of course, in next week's episode number 88 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. But until then, guys, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure to leave a comment about any of the topics that we discussed today. And if you're listening on the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast, make sure to leave a rating and let me know what you think about it there. That will do it for episode number 87 of the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.